remember some of your names. Like I don't. I mean, I'll learn them and I'll remember, but along the way. But I was not looking at specifically. Jane Doe here has a major issue. I mean, that's not what I was looking at. I was looking at your program, how it's implemented, and systems in both schools. Okay, and I was looking at two major areas. Major area number one being environment. What is your linguistic environment in your classroom? And number two, what's the instruction like? Okay, again, across the board. So here are some specific characteristics that I looked at. So for environment, what kind of things did I look at? Well, I looked at your environmental print, first of all. Does it lend itself to a good linguistic, an effective linguistic environment in both English and Spanish if you're self-contained, and if you are separated by team teaching, whatever your target language of instruction is. Okay? Why do you think that that's important? Environmental print.
It reinforces visually to the child where they're at.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay? And remember, always think about your child who may not get it anywhere else except for your classroom. Okay? So if you don't have visual print anywhere in your classroom, then you might want to ask yourself, well, where are they seeing it then? Okay. Number two, authentic student work. Why do you think I was looking for authentic student work? Whether it was in your hallways or inside your classroom, in a journal, so forth. What's the big deal with authentic student work? Especially knowing what you know about characteristics of strong dual language programs, and so forth.
It shows what level the kids are being held to. What's the expectation?
Validates their work and their learning.
Good. Yeah, absolutely. For those students.
If they heard it, they can see it and draw it and understand it.
Good. Any other ideas? And what do I mean by authentic student work? What is authentic student work?
Not a worksheet.
Okay, not a worksheet. And why? But tell me why. Why do you think a worksheet would not be authentic student work? I mean, they're writing, right? They're filling in the blank.
Filling in the blank, that's the problem.
Okay.
It's not their thinking, it's just filling in the blank. It's some author's thinking and the kids is just matching whatever. And you either have the child that knows it or the child that doesn't know. There is no in between or grayscale. So
Okay.
you cannot gauge how much the child knows.
Okay. So give me examples of authentic student work.
Thinking maps.
Okay, good. Thinking maps. They are producing, right? They are expressing, they are producing, they are putting their thoughts on paper. Okay, good. What else?
Science journal.
Journaling, absolutely. Okay, and journaling, especially, give me a specific activity that would really demonstrate authentic student work in a science journal.
We did an experiment with putting wood into water to see what would happen, and I could tell by what they wrote or drew, some of them that weren't really writing, what they wrote or drew, what they got out of it, and it was different. I mean, some kids, and all of it was good, but I saw from their point of view what they learned, because some kids were thinking more of what the wood was doing as far as changing its characteristics in the water, where others were looking at that buoyancy, which is kind of what I was talking about. It was interesting, a lot of them really clued into how the color of the wood changed, and that sort of thing. So it really gave you an insight into where they're thinking, and it's not always the same path you're on.
Okay, so is it through writing that you were able to
Yes,
glean that information?
from what they wrote.
Okay,
yes.
so lots of writing. So writing would be an example of authentic student work in the context of that experiment. Okay, and we're talking about substantial writing, right? Not just copying a sentence off the board and putting it into their journals, because, hey, that's a journal, there's writing there, but it wasn't authentic, right? Okay, good. Instructional materials. I'm looking at things like, do you have a balanced level of Spanish material and English material? And I think I saw that most of you have a lot of material, so I don't think this is a problem here. Grouping configurations. By grouping configurations, I mean, how do you configure your groups of students in your classroom for work, right? So, what do you think, especially because the goal of the program is, okay, we want them to be biliterate, we want them to be bilingual, we want them to have a cooperative learning environment. What classroom and they're in rows and they are sitting in silence for 45 minutes. Well, it's not, some of you are like, please, I wish.
That doesn't happen in my classroom, lady.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I know, I mean, I'm just throwing an example out there, you know, but certainly your physical environment has to lend itself to their being able to converse with one another and interact with one another. Because again, if they don't get it in your classroom, they don't get it anywhere else. Okay, so, and you know, this is an example from another, I promise, another district, another teacher, another school. I saw a teacher who did have, you know, like pods of 4 and a small group table and things like that. And yeah, they were sitting there in groups, but there was no interaction. She would not allow them to speak to one another, she's not comfortable with this, you know, that buzz, that kind of hum. I mean, if you're going to be a dual language teacher, you have to be comfortable with those certain things, right? Because of the goals of the program is a little bit different than just a regular education program. So that's what I meant by grouping configurations. Meeting affective needs. Now, what does anybody know what that word refers to?
I had a girl who was traumatized because she, on Spanish days, she wanted to tell her former teacher what she had done during the weekend or night before, and since it was a Spanish day, she couldn't because she was so afraid she had to draw a red card from or turn her card because she was using English on a Spanish day that she didn't want to do.
Okay, so hold that thought for just a second. I'm going to back up just a little bit and let's talk about the word. What does it look like?
Has to be warm.
Affect is it's more of an emotional.
Okay, good.
In other words, you have to scan to make sure people are learning or that they're confused. You go back and so it's kid reading really. A lot of it.
Kid reading, yeah. Okay, so affect looks like maybe affection. That's how I remember it. So affection, speaking to your emotional side, right? Okay, very important as a dual language to me. I mean, of course, all of these items it's important for all teachers, but specifically to dual language teachers because you could have students who are very uncomfortable, who are not out of certain specific stages of your language proficiency and so forth. So you have to be able to know where your students are at and meet their needs emotionally, okay, emotionally. So what I was looking for was how you interact with the kids, what your rapport is like with the students. Do they feel comfortable with you or do they seem, you know, like real timid or what kind of language were you using with them? Was it encouraging? Was it positive feedback or negative? You know, that's the kind of thing I was looking for there. And then evidence of curriculum. So your environment has to somehow reference the curriculum that is being taught, okay? Because I can go into a classroom and see a lesson, and I can see a great lesson, fabulous teaching going on, a great lesson. But if I don't have a reference to what the curriculum being taught is, it's difficult for me to see if the instruction was aligned with the text. Okay, so here I was specifically looking for what kind of reference is there around the classroom that specifically gives me an idea of what you were teaching. What was the point of the lesson? Okay? Instruction. Consistency with language of instruction. Okay, so you all told me that you have specific days for teaching in specific language. So I was looking at, are you carrying on the fidelity of that model? So for example, if you were in a team teach situation, were you truly teaching English as the English teacher? Were you truly teaching Spanish as a Spanish teacher? Okay, if you were in a self-contained situation, was there inconsistency with the language of instruction, or were you really being faithful to, no, today's a Spanish day, this is the way the design is, and that's what I saw, okay? Number 2 for instruction, meaningful learning opportunities. Okay, is the work that you are asking of the students meaningful, or is it just busy work? Number 3, understanding of second language acquisition of parent and instruction. So there's a lot of second language acquisition theory. There's just basic theory that we're not going to have time to talk too much about today, but I was looking to see as a bilingual teacher or an ESL teacher, if you're in the team teach situation, are you demonstrating that you have a basic knowledge of how language is acquired? So things like, what kind of techniques were you using? Things like TPR or cooperative learning. I saw that you were hitting listening, speaking, reading, writing very intentionally, those types of things that go hand in hand with basic second language acquisition theory. Higher order thinking and rigor. So we talked about how dual language program is always an enrichment type model, right? So there has to be a lot of rigor, has to be a lot of higher order thinking. What level were you teaching at? And then finally, opportunities for students to interact with one another. So those are the things that I looked at. Now, I'm going to share with you some of the data, and we're going to do a little bit of group work, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to sort of flesh out what the data looks like. Again, there's not going to be anything individual here. It's all systemic. And what you're going to see are numbers, and I'll explain what the numbers are, but it's as a whole, including both campuses, both Denton Creek and Wilson. As a whole, we're going to look at what the data based on the observations show. Before I do that, I want to give you, do I need to give you just a quick stretching break? Yeah, yes. That's what I felt. This is not individual, it's systemic. Okay? It is systemic in order to analyze the needs of the program as a whole. So you're not going to see any individual names. In fact, nobody has seen your observations, only I have them. Nobody has seen them. I don't share them with your campus administration. It's not punitive. It's not a PDOS thing or evaluative in that type of way. It is programmatic. So, you're going to see the data that I put together on not all of these components, but the components, some kind of like ahas about certain components, okay? Number 2, I want to go over before we start the norms of, I want to revisit the norms of the PLC today as you go into your small group discussion. Okay, so number 1 was prepare your technology for learning. Number 2 was look for solutions, not blame, solution-oriented. Number 3, focus on systems. We're looking at programs, we're looking at needs of systems, not individual people. We are, number 4, going to recognize that everyone has expertise. And number 5, especially in your small groups, share the talk time. So please be aware of how much you're talking and how much you're not talking. Okay? So that's just going to help facilitate this structured small group time. I'm going to show you the data, and then I'm going to pose some questions to you. When I pose the questions and I give you an opportunity to flesh and process what the questions relate to, I have to give you a specific time limit because otherwise we'll never get out here to eat, which will be, I'm going to aim for about 11:30, and there's not a clock in here.
It's 9:55 right now.
Okay, and I really don't know how to work my phone. Okay, yes, it's almost 10. Yeah, it's just too complicated. So I want to give you enough time to process and speak with one another, but also I need to move us along. Please, when I pose the questions, remember the norms and stay on task. Okay, stay on the topic in question. All right? Okay. Are you ready? Yes. Okay, so I'm going to show you the data. It's not separated by grade level. It's, again, K through 5, both campuses included. You're going to see the specific word observations. So, for example, we have, it's not by teacher. It's by how many times I went into the classroom. Does that make sense? So it's by instance, not by how many teachers. I just want you to process it. I don't want you to discuss anything at this point until I actually give you the points